Hi everybody, thank you for watching. So today's video is going to be my review and thoughts on the new Subculture palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills. Oh man, okay. I feel like everybody is scared to now make this video because unless you've been living under a rock, Anastasia Beverly Hills has released a new palette. This is the sister palette to the Modern Renaissance. This is Subculture, and wow, is there a lot of drama around this palette. There's a lot of drama, there's a lot of backlash, there's a lot of very interesting videos, there's a lot of very strong opinions on this palette. Hear my review, thoughts, my feedback. Then why don't we go ahead and get started. So the new Subculture palette from Anastasia Beverly Hills, honestly there are so many videos out about this. I will include little clips of my tutorial, but the full tutorial will be over on Instagram if you want to see it. Again, I will also insert a photo of the swatches, but I just don't feel like I need to go through and swatch everything because I feel like what a lot of people want to see right now is reviews and feedback on the palette, so that's mostly what I'm going to focus this video on. Alrighty. So this is what the palette looks like. It is just like the Modern Renaissance. It has the kind of velvet front here. And then this is what the inside looks like. You do get a mirror. You also get a double-ended brush. And then you have your 14 shades. It says these feature grungy, matte, and bold metallic shades with an underground edge. The palette is $42, same as the Modern Renaissance. At the time that I'm filming, it's in stock on Sephora and Ulta. It was out of stock at the Anastasia website, but if it's back in stock by the time this video goes up, I will have it linked down below in all of the places where I can find it for sale. I picked mine up from Sephora. I did not do the initial launch on the Anastasia website, mostly because I enjoy purchasing from Sephora or Ulta because I like their reward system. I also trust Sephora and Ulta a little bit more than the Anastasia website. I've had a few issues ordering directly from the Anastasia website, so I wanted a retailer where I felt a little bit more comfortable. I could also get some points and some eBates at the same time. I'll link my Will I Buy It below where I talked about this palette, and you could tell in that video I was just super hyped for this palette. Like I said, I was super hyped for this palette in my Will I Buy It video, so when I started seeing the reviews coming out and I started seeing just the absolute hate and bashing on this palette, I was super upset. I was really bummed, but it honestly, I'm being completely honest, it got in my head that I was like, well then I just shouldn't buy it. You know, I don't want to waste my $42 if a palette is really so terrible. And my Snapchat had a big part of convincing me that, you know, no, you just need to go ahead and buy it. You know, we want your opinion too. And that means a lot to me. When people want my reviews and people want my feedback, that means a lot to me. And that's something that I don't take for granted. So I thought, okay, I need to go ahead and get it. Sephora does have a nice return policy. If you order something from Sephora, you don't like it, you can return it within a certain time frame. So I thought if I really do hate it, like everybody is telling me I'm going to hate it, then I can return it. But at least I gave it a try. So I feel like I just don't even know where to begin or where to start. If you follow me on Snapchat, you've seen I got this palette on Thursday. I'm filming this on Sunday. You have seen that I have been trying this palette like crazy. When I got it, I did an eye look on one eye, a different eye look on the other eye, wiped them off, eye look, wiped them off, eye look, eye look. I've been wearing this palette every single day since I got it, which again has only been a handful of days, but I've also been doing multiple looks in the days because I wanted to see how all of the different shadows performed and what I thought about them on my eyes. What I think about this palette is that I really like it. Sorry. If you are coming here for bashing on this palette, then I suggest that you leave. If you are coming here and you already have your mind made up on this palette, whether you own it or you don't, you already have your mind made up that this is the worst palette of 2017. It's so awful. I suggest clicking out of this video because that's not what this video is going to be about. I like this palette. I don't love this palette, but I really do like this palette. So I want to tell you guys why I like this palette, what I think the pros and the cons are, who I think this palette is good for, and who I don't think it is good for. So obviously the biggest issue that everybody is having with this palette, it seems like, is the amount of fallout and the whole hitting pan scandal after using it one time. Okay, this palette has a ton of fallout. A ton of fallout. But so does my Modern Renaissance. This definitely has more fallout than my Modern Renaissance, but my Modern Renaissance gets a ton of fallout as well. My Lorac has very soft eyeshadow palettes. They have a ton of fallout. Dose of Colors, my Marvelous Mauves palette, the very first thing that I noticed, and I think the first thing I said when I reviewed that palette is, oh my gosh, there is so much kick up. A lot of palettes have a lot of fallout. I mean, it's just the way that it is. So the amount of fallout does not bother me because it only takes me 2 seconds to tap my brush off, and it only takes me 2 seconds to blow my palette off. So the amount of fallout does not bother me. Is it something that I notice right away, and is it something that I would list as a con? Yes, as I have with Dose of Colors, as I have with Modern Renaissance, as I have with Lorac palettes. So the fallout is definitely a con, but it's not something that I think makes this the worst palette of 2017. The next issue that people have been having is that they're hitting pan extremely early. This eyeshadow palette is such a unique formula. It reminds me in ways of the Modern Renaissance, but it's definitely a different formula than the Modern Renaissance, which kind of does disappoint me because I know that they say this is the sister palette to the Modern Renaissance. This is like the dark, edgy, sexy version from the Modern Renaissance, but I was hoping the formulas would be a little bit more similar because the Modern Renaissance is so loved. It's such a like holy grail staple favorite palette for so many people, myself included. I was hoping it would be more on the Modern Renaissance side. I know they're sisters, not twins, but I was a little caught off guard by the formula. It is extremely, extremely soft. I could tell just when I put my fingers in, and the matte shades, I want to point that out. The matte shades are extremely soft. These shimmers, so we have a duochrome right here, we have a duochrome right here, and then this is a metallic shadow. The rest of them are mattes. Those three shades are pressed very, very firmly into the palette to the point where it's almost kind of hard to get the duochromes and the metallics out. I think that they are very pretty. I have both electric and cube on my eyes today. I think that they are very pretty, but they're definitely packed super, super firmly in there. They're kind of hard to get out, but the matte shades are very, very soft. When I was just putting my fingers in to swatch them, I was like, whoa, that is a very soft formula. So when people are going in with their brushes and digging their brushes in, things are happening. There's a lot of fallout. I understand that people are hitting pan and that sucks. And one thing that I will say, a couple things that I want to say on the hitting pan thing is that I'm not someone who like goes ham on my makeup. If you watch my used and abused makeup tag, I'm like, yes, I wanted to do this tag, but not a lot of my makeup looks abused because I'm very careful and I'm very kind to my makeup. I know some people really like to go ham and just get in there, but that is not me. So I think that's a reason why this palette actually works for me, is because that you need a softer hand when you're using it, and that is my style of makeup. So if you know that you're someone who really just goes to town on your palettes, this probably isn't gonna be for you because I can see you hitting pan sooner than you probably want to. Another thing that I want to say is because of the reviews that were coming out, I was also aware of that. You know, maybe if I hadn't seen these other reviews or I didn't know how soft these shadows are, maybe I would have gone in there and gone crazy and hit pan. I don't think I would have because of my personality when it comes to makeup and my technique, but that was something that I was already aware of and I knew how to handle the shadows. I understand that there are some videos out there where people are trying to be overly dramatic. I mean, I think we can agree that there are several people out there that are doing insane things to their palettes for the views and for the drama, which is very strange to me. But at the same time, I think there are people who that's just how they're used to eyeshadow palettes and that's how they did this palette, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh my gosh, holy crap, now I've hit pan and I've only used this palette 2 times. So I'll show you a close-up of my palette. This is a close-up of it. I have used every single shade out of this palette, and I have used this palette, oh man, I don't even know guys, I kind of have lost track. I've done probably 15 eye looks or so with this palette, again using every single shade. That's what my palette looks like. I have not hit pan on any of my shades. Another issue that I've been seeing a lot is that people are saying these shadows do not blend well. What I will say about that is this dark purple shade right here, it is called Rowdy. I do not think that shade blends at all. But what's really funny to me is that that shade actually reminded me a lot of a shade in the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette. It's on the bottom row. I think it's the second to last shade. It's very similar. I swatched it thinking maybe it'd be a dupe. They're similar, but they're not dupes. But that shade I can't get to blend either in the Jaclyn palette. There's a shade in the Too Faced Sweet Peach palette, which I really enjoy. I want to say it's called Derby, but I'm not positive. That shade doesn't blend well for me either. I'm not the greatest at doing makeup, and I'm not the greatest at blending, and sometimes when it comes to darker shades, I can't blend them and I can't blend this shade. Most of the other shades I'm not finding any issues with. I've used, like I said, I've used all the shadows on my eyes. I've been finding that they're working really well for me, especially the lighter shades. I mean, those don't take me any time to blend. I have no problems with them. The darker shades I feel like are harder to blend, but I feel that in most eyeshadow palettes that I use. So that's not necessarily an issue for me. And also for me, I don't really use dark shades like this a ton. So it doesn't bother me if I have the 1 to 2 shades that I don't use in a palette, because that's standard to me for every eyeshadow palette that I buy. So that's kind of what I think about the blending issue on these. It's really interesting to me too, like how I said in the beginning of the video, if you already have your mind made up on this palette, then I hope that you've already clicked out. But one thing that I found very interesting when I was going through on my Snapchat and doing some different looks, I mean, obviously I'm sharing one look on Snapchat and, you know, all these people are seeing it and I'm getting the comments coming in. And some of the comments are like, girl, it looks great. It looks like it blends well. I love that. It looks pigmented, etc. And then other people are looking at the exact same photo and saying, girl, that does not blend at all. That looks terrible. This palette's awful. You need to return it. So that's why I think if you have your mind made up that you hate this palette, then you're just gonna hate the palette. And I don't know what else to do for you, because that I thought was super interesting to me, that I'm showing the exact same look and I'm getting such different feedback. Those are, you know, some of the cons. The fallout, I almost have to have a specific technique with the palette, which I understand is frustrating, but at the same time, it's not something that deters me enough that I don't like this palette. The blendability is not there for all of the shades, but for the majority of them, I don't have an issue with. And I know that the color selection, like some people are like, I don't get the color selection. I actually really like it because it pushes me out of my comfort zone. I don't do these kind of like grungy, dirty looks a lot, but I've been really obsessed with some of these shades, especially this edge right here, the yellow, and then this kind of this like funky orange I think is super cool. Destiny is kind of this olive green shade. I've been really obsessed with that. There's a lot of shades in here that push me out of my comfort zone, and for someone who I'm not very artistically creative, sometimes I need a palette like this to kind of help push me and not do my same standard looks over and over and over again, because I definitely have a comfort zone when it comes to makeup. So those are some of my cons, and some of my pros at the same time. I mean, I mentioned a few as I was talking about the cons, or I had, you know, a flip side to a con, but the biggest pro I think with this palette is that these shades are so intensely pigmented. This palette is insanely pigmented. I will have a swatch photo inserted in here as well, but even just slightly dipping my fingers into the palette to get a swatch, I'm like, are you kidding me? Now, I haven't watched the full Stephanie Nicole video. I was trying not to watch as many review videos as I could before I filmed mine, because I just didn't want to get too many different thoughts in my head and, you know, things like that. But, you know, obviously I see conversations and I see what people are saying. And Stephanie Nicole said that she thinks that these are more like pure pressed pigments, I believe is what she said. I will have her video linked down below so you can check it out as well. I really enjoy her reviews. I can't wait to watch the full video. Because I'm very curious to see all of her thoughts. But she mentioned that she thinks the palette is pure pressed pigments, and how those can be super soft and you do have to be more delicate with them. And I would agree with that. I'm not as knowledgeable about makeup as someone like Stephanie Nicole, so, you know, I'm just gonna kind of have to go what she says, but I would agree with that because this is such a different formula than anything I've really ever tried. I will insert some clips from the tutorial that I did here, and like I said, it will be on Instagram, but you will see me just lightly tap my brush and then I flip it around right away to show you, and you see how much pigment, how much shadow is on my brush. You do not get that with a lot of different palettes. Even the palettes that have the super soft shadows, Lorac, Dose of Colors, even those, you don't get that type of pigment on your brush. Extremely, extremely pigmented. I will say when you start to blend them, then they can kind of lose their pigmentation. So what I prefer to do with almost every single shade I've used in here is to use more of a patting, tapping motion on my eyes and not do so much of the harsh blending, because then, especially with the darker colors, then those shades can kind of fade away. So for me, that's how I like to do it. I completely understand if you don't want a palette that you have to change up your technique. That makes total sense. I absolutely 100% get that. But for me, it's not something that bothers me, and it's not something that makes me want to return this palette. It's not something that makes me want to never use this palette. It's just, okay, this is what I have to do for this palette. There's other palettes that I really enjoy that aren't super pigmented, but I take my time to build shadows up and to blend them out because I like the palette so much. So it's just really gonna come down to personal preference, but definitely I feel like the biggest pro is that these are insanely pigmented eyeshadows. Another pro for me that could be a con for others is the color selection. Like I mentioned, this pulls me out of my comfort zone. This makes me create different looks than I would with a lot of other palettes, and I'm super into the shades in here. Again, that's going to be personal preference. I will say I didn't like the brush. I didn't put that brush in the con, but the brush I don't think is any good, and I also don't like the blending side of the brush. I don't like this side of the brush because it's very, very scratchy, and I feel like with what the shadows are like in the palette, you need like a softer brush. So I don't think the brush is like cohesive to the palette at all, so I'm very confused why that brush was in there. Another big thing with this palette is that I think depending on your type of makeup technique is going to depend on if you like this palette and if it will work for you. Like I mentioned, I'm very like soft and gentle when it comes to my palettes. I just am. You very rarely see my palettes even getting very dirty. You don't really see, I mean, I'm hard pressed to say if I have a palette that you see me hit pan on, because I am so very light when it comes to my makeup, and that's just the way that I am. So I actually don't mind that I have to use such a light hand to go into a palette. It just works for me. If you're that person, like I mentioned earlier, that you just really like to go crazy, then I can definitely see you not getting along with this palette, and I can see you, you know, probably hitting pan right away. I don't know how long it's gonna take me to hit pan because I'm not going to waste my palette to figure that out. So that can be a pro or a con either way. Another thing that I think is a pro is how little shadow you need to get very intense payoff. I think that's fantastic, and I don't understand why people are so upset about that, because I would like to use as little product as I can and get such intense color on my eyes. That sounds fantastic to me, but so many people are like mad at that. I don't really understand that part, but I don't know. It is what it is, but that's another really big pro for me, and my pros personally outweigh the cons. So for me, with this palette, I really do like it. Do I love it? No. Do I hate it? No. Am I gonna return it? No. I return makeup if I don't like it. I would love to get my $42 back if I thought I'm not gonna use that palette and I just despise that palette. I would take it back to Sephora. But I'm not going to, because I like it. I have to say that I film with a Sony a5100, which I really enjoy this camera. It's very beginner friendly, which is fantastic for me, but it overheats after about 13 minutes and I have to let it cool down. Normally it's okay, but when there's a video where I just want to sit down and talk and have all my thoughts compiled, it can be really frustrating because I've had to cut myself off now a couple times, and then I kind of lose my train of thought and I'm like, what was I just saying? So I apologize if my thoughts kind of seem scattered all over the place or things like that, but it's really frustrating when you have a camera that overheats when you're trying to just sit down and like get all of your thoughts out at once. That can be super frustrating, but kind of just how I want to wrap up this very different review style of video is that I think this palette is going to be very, very personal preference, and I feel like that's the way with a lot of makeup. So it's very interesting to me seeing all of this backlash and seeing this drama about a palette. I feel like it has brought a really ugly side out of a lot of people, which is super, super disheartening to see. We have enough problems out there with cyberbullying and bullying and violence in general, and to see people attacking other people over an eyeshadow palette has been very eye-opening to me, to be very honest. I just want to remind people that this is just an eyeshadow palette and it's just makeup. If you don't want to buy it, you don't have to buy it. If you want to buy it and you end up hating it, retailers like Sephora and Ulta will take them back. Anastasia will take them back. I know Norvina put out on her Twitter that they will take the returns, which I think they have a return policy anyways. I'm not 100% on that, but she reinstated on her Twitter that if you don't like this palette, you can return it. So I don't know. I guess I don't understand the drama. I don't understand how horrible people are being to one another over makeup. So I just kind of wanted to give a reminder of it's just makeup, guys, and it doesn't have to be as serious as so many people are making it out to be. I just wanted to sit down and give my thoughts and opinion on this palette, and my thoughts are mostly positive. Yeah, there's cons about this palette. There's things that I don't love. but I still think it's a good eyeshadow palette. I just think it's very different and people weren't ready for it. I think if there's any mistake that Norvina from Anastasia Beverly Hills made with this palette is that there wasn't any sort of like upfrontness about what the pigmentation, what the formula was going to be on this eyeshadow palette. I think that was probably a mistake not to come out to say, and by the way, the formula is like this. This is how you're going to want to use the eyeshadow palette, because I don't feel like anybody knew going into this palette. So when people were getting their first batch of palettes and they were rubbing their brushes in there like they normally would an eyeshadow palette, that's not their fault. You know, that's not them trying to cause the drama. I feel like it was them how they would normally test out an eyeshadow palette, but because of the formula being so different on this, people weren't ready for it. So I think if there's any mistake that Norvina made, it was not saying that. You know, she put out a YouTube video all about this palette. There was no mention in there at all about how to even use the palette or how to prepare people. I feel like a lot of this, I don't feel like all of the drama could have been saved, but a lot of the drama could have been saved if that would have been addressed before this palette went on sale. So I don't, that's kind of my feedback there, but for me, I really like it. For my technique that I use, I get along very well with this palette. I don't mind the fallout at all. I don't mind how soft the shadows are. I've been creating a lot of looks with them and I really like all of the looks. This is such an extremely pigmented palette and I'm very happy with it. So I don't know, there's my thoughts, there's my opinion on the palette. I don't feel like this is the most professional review I've ever done. I don't feel like I did it how I do a lot of my other reviews, going into the swatches and talking about each of the shades and showing a tutorial. But again, I feel like with what's been happening with this palette is that people don't really want that. They just want to get someone's feedback on the palette. I hope that I helped you out. It's also been really upsetting to me on my Snapchat to hear people say, I don't even want to say that I like this palette because people are attacking me like on Twitter and stuff. That's ridiculous. Don't attack someone over makeup. Like, come on, guys. Come on. There's so many bigger problems out there. Like, it's just so crazy to me. But I like this palette and I'm not going to jump on the bandwagon of wanting to start drama and wanting to cut down this palette when I actually like it. Again, if I don't like makeup, I return it. I'm not going to sit and continually spend my money on items that are just going to clog up my collection that I'm never going to use. I see myself reaching for this palette quite a bit, especially when it comes time for the more fall makeup looks, because I feel like there's a lot of really fun fall looks that you can do with this palette. But I have no plans to return it. I really enjoy it. For $42, I don't feel like that's a bad price for a high-end palette. The Naked Heat was $54. I returned that. The Too Faced eyeshadow palettes are usually $49. I think Kat Von D is around the $48. The Tarte, like Tartelette and Bloom, that was $46. The bigger Tarte palette, Tarte Pro, I think was in the $50 range. So for this to be $42, I also didn't find that as a bad price for a high-end palette, and I really like it. I don't like it as much as my Modern Renaissance. I don't know if I would be able to classify this as a favorite. I'll have to play with it a little bit more, but I like it enough that I think I will reach for it very often, and I do like it. Would I recommend it to everybody? Not a chance, because this is not going to be a palette for everybody. Not only is the color selection very different, but you will have to almost kind of baby the palette. You will have to adopt a different technique with this palette, and I understand that not everybody's going to want to do that. So I don't think this palette is for everybody. I would really recommend maybe going into a store, or if you have a friend that got the palette, playing with the palette yourself, seeing if you think it would be a good fit for you. For me personally, it's a good fit for me. I would love to know your guys' thoughts and feedback down below. I would love to know if you guys got the palette and what you think of it. I would love to know if you still plan on getting the palette. I'm super curious to just get your guys' thoughts. I'm very excited to start watching review videos now that I finally have this review video up. I just hope people are giving this palette a fair chance and not just writing it off because of all these super dramatic videos that we're seeing with the thumbnails with every single shade that has hit pan on it. It's just, that is just really, really silly in my opinion. But for me personally, the Subculture palette works for me. If you think that we have similar tastes, if you think that we have similar makeup techniques, I think it could work for you. If you guys want to see me use this in a makeup tutorial here on YouTube, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to create a tutorial over here. I'll be doing some on my Instagram as well, including the look that I'm wearing on my eyes today. So that's gonna do it for my review and thoughts on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette. I really hope that I didn't leave anything out. Like I said, I hate that my camera cuts me off when I'm trying to do these types of videos because I can kind of lose my train of thought. But if I forgot anything that I wanted to mention, I will pin it in a comment down below so I can have that out there. Like I said, all the links will be down there there as well. And yeah, I'm excited to chat with you guys in the comments. You guys know I read and respond to all of my comments, so I'm excited to have some conversations with you guys and what you think about it down there. But that is going to do it for my review and thoughts on the Anastasia Beverly Hills Subculture palette. I sincerely hope that you guys found this video helpful or useful in some way. If you did, I hope that you will give it a thumbs up. I hope that you will also consider subscribing before you go, and I'll catch you guys real soon in my next one. Bye.